Hello, everyone, and welcome to Murder in Stratton County, written by Elizabeth Spoon and Ryland Mason, narrated by me, Brian Shepard. Chapter 4, Part 2, When It Rains, It Pours. Deputy Marks had already taped off a large area around the trailer and surrounding area by the time the troopers that were dispatched arrived. Thankfully, it was at the end of the season, and the other trailers were empty. Otherwise, he would have had people tramping through his crime scene. Dugan pulled in, parking behind a trooper's SUV. Marks had the trunk open to his cruiser and had already collected several pieces of evidence, including blood samples, a strand of dark brown hair that he found caught in the kickplate of the door, and a possible index fingerprint off a glass from inside the trailer. He greeted the troopers and then turned to look at Deputy Marks. "Good work, Deputy." Dugan started to look around. "This place is kind of gloomy, huh?" Mark said, as if the place gave him the creeps. "Yeah, sure is. Before you got here, there was a murder of crows over in the field." Looking off into the distance, Dugan looked at him. "You know, crows are scavengers. We better check the field." They spread out, walked slowly over the long grass, looking hard for possible clues that could lead anywhere. There was nothing, not even an animal carcass of any kind. They wrapped up as much as they could as potential evidence, and Deputy Marks put a seal on the door to the trailer. "Leave the tape up until we figure out what's going on," he said. They packed up everything they had collected and headed back to the station. Beforehand, Dugan thanked the troopers and turned to Marks. "You get those blood samples and the rest of the evidence to the lab as soon as possible." "Yes, sir." It was closing in on 2 p.m. Dugan had just returned to the station. Just as he sat down at his desk, the phone rang. "Hello, Sheriff Ratchet." "Dugan, it's Dennis. Dennis Malloy. How are you, old friend?" "Well, I'm okay, but I have a sensitive situation down here I need help with. Are you available?" "What kind of situation? Can the state police help?" "I was hoping to keep it as quiet as possible for now, but they are aware. It has some political implications for our mayor and such. Right now, it's an arson and a missing persons case, but I fear it could be much worse." Now massaging his temple. "I can give you 3 days." "Great. I will get down there as soon as possible. Just got a couple of things to wrap up here, and I'll see you soon." "Thanks, Dennis." Dennis hung up, and the sheriff clicked the receiver button and dialed Brian's office. Brian answered on the third ring. "Hello? Brian, it's Dugan." "Hi, any news?" "Well, some. Did you find Prudence?" "The place was a mess, my friend. Her car was there, but no sign of her yet. You want to get some late lunch and go over it?" "Let me get back to you on that." "Okay. I made some calls to a friend upstate. He may be able to help. Get back to me as soon as you're free." Dugan hung up. Brian was busy writing a statement for tomorrow's edition of the paper, and his meeting with Diego, who was running late and hadn't shown up at the town hall yet. Dugan clicked on his computer screen and began typing his report for the missing persons case, noting all the evidence that he and Marks had collected. His phone rang. "Ratchet here." "Sheriff, it's Duchess. Can you tell me anything?" "No, ma'am. I can't release any information until our investigation is complete." "Well, okay." That was it. She had hung up. Dugan had the same mindset as Brian had. Asked himself the same questions. If this was a life-and-death situation and another attempt was made, printing details of an ongoing investigation would be hazardous. Brian looked at the clock on his desk. 2:15. He reached for the phone and was about to call Dugan back, grabbing at the stack of papers and his notepad and pushing it all into a file, when Diego tapped on the door. "Sir, I apologize for my tardiness." No, it's fine. I will give you a quick statement, but I really can't tell you too much." Diego looked at him, sort of disappointed. "It's an ongoing investigation. So far, it's too early to say for sure what happened. That's about it." Diego jotted a few things down, contemplating what questions to print in the next article. and speculated his own possible theories of what wasn't being said. "Well, thank you for your time, sir." Diego headed for the door. "Hey, kid." He turned and looked at the mayor. "Keep your eyes open and keep a low profile. You might get a scoop." Diego smiled a little and disappeared out the door. Brian picked up the phone and pressed 3. The phone began to ring on the other end. "Hello, Stratton Police Station." "Hello, Deputy Marks." "Hi, Mr. Mayor. Sheriff, the mayor for you." "Thanks, Marks. Patch it through to my office." "Sure thing." Dugan got up and closed the door to his office. "Hang on just a second." Brian heard the phone click a couple of times, and then Dugan picked up. "Anything new?" Dugan could hear the anxiety a little in Brian's voice. "Well, so far we've collected some evidence. There looks to be a struggle that happened out at the Wainwright place. I'm still waiting on the lab reports. It could take 24 hours, maybe longer. We had them all sent out, and my college buddy from upstate called me back." "The detective?" "Yes, Dennis Malloy. He said he could give us 3 days. He's on his way here. He recommended we keep as much possible quiet till there's more information available. He also recommended we call the state police and talk to the chief, which I already did. I got some reports to make out and need to make some notes." "Okay, keep me posted." "Sure thing, old friend." And Dugan hung up. Brian put the receiver down on the base. He sank back in the chair, pondering what the next 24 hours would bring. The hours passed. All the while, Brian contemplated if Dugan had made any headway. The clock chimed on the hour on his desk. It was pushing 4:30 p.m. Debbie tapped on the door. "Sir, I took the liberty of ordering you a sandwich and picked up your groceries from that young man at the market. Miss Boyd had already left for the day, as well as Shep." "Debbie, you're the best secretary ever." "Thank you, sir." She laid a wrapped sandwich on the desk with a small bag of chips and a can of diet soda. "It's turkey and cheese. I'm heading out to the cottage with your groceries, and I picked you up your other suit from the dry cleaners." "Thanks so much, Debbie." She already had a scarf on. "Gonna get chilly tonight, sir. Weatherman said negative numbers. I put your heavier jacket and scarf in the front closet if you want it, and I can get the fireplace going if you like when I get out to the cottage." "Again, thanks." "That sounds great." Brian looked at her. She smiled a quick smile and was gone again. Brian quickly opened the sandwich, realizing how hungry he was, took a few bites of the sandwich. He cracked the can of soda, washing down the last bit and tossing the empty can into the recycling bin, along with the wrapper into the trash. He was about to click off the desk lamp and head for the front closet to retrieve his coat and scarf when the phone rang. It was Dugan. "Hello? Did you eat?" Yeah. Debbie took care of that." "So?" "Nothing yet from the lab, but I'm staying on it. Dennis phoned me again. He will be arriving sometime early in the morning." "Well, that's news anyway." "Yes. What time were you planning to head out?" "Shortly. Debbie is on her way out to drop off my groceries." Dugan was quiet for a minute. "Well, how about I meet you out there, just as a precaution?" "Sounds good. We have much to talk about." And then they hung up. Brian turned back to his office, for a moment grabbing his files and notepad and tucking them under his arm. By the time the sheriff and the mayor had reached the cottage, Debbie had come and gone. Dugan stepped out of the car. Brian pulled into the garage, and Dugan stepped inside as the door closed behind them. They headed for the kitchen entrance. Dugan unclasped his sidearm as Brian slid the key into the door, and they stepped into the house. The secretary had let the light on in the kitchen. Brian grabbed the fire poker and stabbed at the smoldering logs. It let out a large crack, and flame jumped up from them. He threw on another small piece as Dugan finished checking the house and walked into the living room. Brian pulled 2 glasses from the shelf behind the minibar. "Apple martini?" "No, I will take it straight up." He poured a couple of drinks, handing a glass to Dugan. He took a sip and leaned on the mantel, staring into the fire. Meanwhile, Back into town, Diego was rushing to get to his office and write the front page story for the paper. He pushed open the pizza door. "Mom, slow down, Diego. What is it?" "Not sure. Have to get writing." Diego grabbed a slice of pizza, a soda, and quickly exited the back door to the back entrance of the Gazette's office. Rhonda looked at Maria. She smiled back. "He does have a passion for writing." "He sure does," Shep boomed. "Well, what do you say we head out?" Rhonda reached for her coat, which was draped across the stool next to her as Shep stood and pulling up his wallet from his pocket and retrieving a $20 bill. He tossed it down the counter, slipping his arm into a sleeve of his jacket. Maria pulled the paper plates and used napkins from the counter, tossing them into the barrel. She wiped the counter down with a damp cloth and picked up the cash. "Thanks," Shep said. Maria walked to the register to cash their bill. "Keep the change, chica," Shep finished, pulling out on his coat. "The two of you better bundle up. The weatherman says the temperature's going to drop tonight. Hard freeze." Rhonda was still buttoning her coat, her bracelets jingling inside her sleeve as she moved her hands up to the next button. "Thanks again, Maria. Have a good night, you two." "Good night." Shep and Rhonda stepped out into the brisk cold air, where Shep's beat-up old station wagon that was parked in front. Rhonda lit a cigarette. "When are you going to get a new car, Shep?" "There's nothing wrong with this old girl," he smirked back at her. The sun had already fallen behind the mountain peaks, feeling the cold air pushing in, and the wind had picked up. He reached down and pulled the passenger door open. Rhonda sliding into the passenger seat. Walking around the car, he slumped into the driver's seat and slammed the door. She turned and looked at him. He let out a and a slight belch, content to be full of pizza, and turned the key in the ignition, and the old wagon engine roaring to life. It was obvious that there was an exhaust leak. "I'll give her a few to warm up." He lit up a smoke, reaching for the crank to roll the window down, a crack just to let the smoke out. As they sat waiting for the warmth to come through the heater vents, Rhonda watched through the passenger window at Maria closing up the pizza shop for the night. Reaching for the string to shut off her open sign and turning the lock of the glass front door. In the adjacent building, through the big glass windows, she could see a faint glow of a desk lamp coming from the cracked office door. No doubt Maria's son, vigorously writing tomorrow's headline for the front page story. Quiet tonight. Rhonda turned to look at Shep and then at her watch. It was just before 8 p.m. "Yeah, not too many people out. The cold, I suspect," Shep said, "minus the hardcore skiers from the mountain resort on the other side of the pass." Shep took a long drag on his cigarette and rolled up the window, flicking the head off and shoving the burnt-out filter into the door. "What do you think the paper will say tomorrow? What's the big scoop you think they may have?" Shep turned his body towards her on the big bench seat. "A better question would be, do you want to have some fun?" He had a big smile on his face, and he draped his arm across the back of the seat, touching her shoulder. Rhonda laughed and shook her head. "We aren't teenagers." She flicked a long ash of her own cigarette out the window, the still burning head dropping to the pavement, and tossed the filter into the pocket of the passenger door. Rolling up the window, she turned to Shep, who was wiggling his eyebrows like a hungry schoolboy at her. She laughed. "You're incorrigible." She squeezed his cheeks with her hands, and he leaned in for a kiss. "Let's go be teenagers for a bit." Shep put the station wagon in gear and checked his mirror, pulled out onto the road. He turned, heading out of town towards the farms and fields. No doubt a dark, private place to squeeze into the back seat of the wagon and get it on. Before long, the station wagon was rolling into an abandoned field on the outskirts of the county. An old, crumbling barn still stood at one edge, looking as if a stiff breeze might just send it tumbling to its demise of rot and reclamation by the grass and overgrowth. He pulled farther into the field, staying in the tracks of a farmer that had obviously cut through the property at some point. The tracks were recent, the yellowish color of his headlights reflecting off the still-tail grass that hadn't been cut for hay. He pulled even further in, the tracks from the tractor veering off to the right and heading towards to an adjacent field. To his left, a giant grove of enormous pines were towering over them and the car. They marked the edge of the field. This looks like a good spot. He turned the station wagon around and backed into the bald spot under the nearest pines, turning the knob and killing the headlights. Can you leave this heap running? I don't want to freeze. Shep looked at her. Only the glow from the old radio, which was on, but turned down just enough, was enough on her face. Sure thing, hot stuff, but you won't freeze with me. Ha! You know you're not 20 anymore. Yeah, I know, but I feel young. Shep reached for the dial on the radio and tuned in the station, turning it up just a bit so they could hear it. It was a country station, but it was going in and out, the hissing from the receiver trying to pick it up. Rhonda moved his hand away from the dial. Here, let me. Okay, baby. As she fiddled with the dial searching for a clearer station, Shep moved in closer, squeezing her thigh and rubbing her back on the other hand. Got one. Music poured out of the speakers, some station from the city. Reggae. Let's stretch our legs for a minute first. Rhonda opened her passenger door and stepped out, Shep sliding across the seat and exiting the passenger side with her. I'm going to go take a leak, and then you and I have a date in the back seat. How can you even see out there? I got that covered. He pulled a small flashlight from his pocket. I came prepared. You were planning this, weren't you? Yeah, well, your downstairs tenant made a comment last time I was at your place. Guess we make too much noise, Rhonda laughed. The woman is 86-year-old, Shep. Why couldn't we just go to your house? Come on, Rhonda. This way it's more romantic and off the cuff than banging on my couch. Rhonda stayed near the car. Well, go drain your bladder so I can use the flashlight. It's cold and dark out here. Okay, I'll be right back. Rhonda could see the dim light of the flashlight as Shep made his way back towards one of the pines. The light disappeared for a minute as he shoved it into his coat pocket and proceeded to relieve himself. The light reappeared a moment later. Shep, emerging from behind the pines, zipping up his pants, he walked back to the car, heading towards Rhonda and handing her the flashlight. Do you need to, tinkle? Very funny, smartass. Rhonda took the light and Shep crawled into the car and shut the passenger door, turning up the heater and flicking on the interior light. He rolled down the window for a moment. You okay out there? Yeah, I'm fine. Shut that light off before someone sees. Like who? There's no one out here. Rhonda flicked the flashlight a couple of times. The batteries were about to die. I better hurry, she thought. She made her way towards a different set of pines, being careful not to rattle the batteries in the flashlight so it would stay on long enough for her to do her business. She chose a spot and pulled a napkin from her coat pocket. She tucked the flashlight under her arm, and, hiking up her skirt, she squatted to relieve herself. As she was just finishing, the flashlight slipped from under her arm and hit the ground, rolling a few feet and dimming to almost nothing. Crap. Finishing up with the napkin, she reached out into the pitch black, feeling for now the out flashlight. It's gotta be here. Her hand brushed over what felt like a stubby root sticking out of the ground. Damn it. Hey, you okay? She could hear Shep calling. Yeah, I dropped the flashlight, though. Shep was about to get out of the car when Rhonda's hand brushed across the hard plastic molding of the flashlight. I got it. Fiddling with it for a second, it popped back on. She scanned the ground around her. Rhonda couldn't believe what she was seeing. Shep! Oh my God! Rhonda made a beeline for the car. Shep! She tore open the passenger door. Shep was already in the back seat, naked, waiting for her. He sat up. What is it? An animal? The look on her face was of sheer horror. It's a foot. What? You're seeing things. No, I'm not, damn it. I freaking touched it when I was feeling for the flashlight. Okay, calm down. He pulled on his clothes, dismayed, and slipped on his shoes. You better not be kidding. Why would I be kidding? Where's that flashlight? Rhonda handed it to Shep. She tapped it against her leg, and the dim light flickered but stayed on. Where? Over there. Rhonda pointed to the tree where she had just been. Holy crap! Shep surveyed the scene with the dimming flashlight. It was a foot, all right, sticking out of the ground. He could see that the ground had been disturbed. The pine needles and leaves and branches had been used in an attempt to conceal it. I think I'm going to vomit. Well, don't do it here, Shep backed up. Let's go. We need to call the sheriff. They ran to the car. Rhonda, still in shock, she had touched a dead foot. Was there a body connected? Or was it just a foot? Shep roared out of the pine grove, flicking on his headlights, and made it for the road. Romantic, huh? This is your idea of romance? Shep couldn't help but snicker at her. Rhonda, it's not like I planned that, he snapped back. Shep pulled out onto the road, the wagon's engine squealing as they headed for the nearest phone. Thanks, everyone. That was part 2, chapter 4, When It Rains, It Pours. I'll see you for chapter 5.